Welcome to our podcast, Pathway to Compliance. I'm Sally Smozinski, one of your hosts. Today, I am with Chad Thomas from Mambu. Chad is the channel's account executive, and Mambu focuses on helping financial institutions adopt modern cloud-based banking platforms and build strategic partnerships, which is most important, within their innovation. So, Chad, welcome.
Thank you, Sally. Appreciate you inviting me on.
So, when we talked before, you mentioned a lot of things about the digital transformation, but when you talk to banking executives today, what's the single driver pushing the organizations to accelerate their digital transformation journey?
Sure. I don't know if there's a single one, but a lot of what we hear is dissatisfaction with vendor lock-in, the inability to move at the pace they want to move. They often have to go to their existing legacy vendor to plan and organize around their schedule. And then, just the simple fact that technology is moving so quickly that in order to keep up with the fintechs that come out of nowhere seemingly, they need to be able to add new solutions to their tech stack. And that requires a composable architecture with native APIs that allow for you to really orchestrate any solution you need in a faster time frame.
So a word that I had not been used to hearing before is composable. So explain to me a little bit more about Mambu's platform and how composable banking has evolved.
Sure. So Mambu's core is what we call a thin core. And what makes it composable is that every field is an API. So it doesn't do anything that you would typically think of in a legacy or monolithic build. It is just your core, which is defined as your accounts, your members or customers, and your transaction processing. Everything outside of that is handled outside of the Mambu solution. You take an orchestration layer like a MuleSoft or a PortX or a Connective, and you take third-party solutions for teller, digital, your Wolters Kluwer or whatever you use for regulatory compliance, reporting, document management, and you create a stack around the core that allows you to do everything you need to do as a financial institution. And then, for example, when the payments rails went from ISO 15022 to ISO 222, a big issue was that everybody had to either upgrade their entire stack to be able to handle that, or what many did is just implemented translators that would consume the 222 messages, but really just convert them back to the old message type that the legacy solution was able to accept. With a composable architecture, because of the orchestration, you really just need to take out the piece of the stack that is no longer fit for purpose and either upgrade or put in a new solution that can handle the new technology.
Interesting. So what drove Mambu to create this client?
Yeah, so really it's a matter of understanding what today and tomorrow's financial institutions need in order to support their members and their customers. The reality is that what we've seen, even going back as far as PayPal, but certainly accelerating with today's fintechs, is that they have the ability to innovate and bring new products up and running in a very short amount of time. So when you think about especially smaller community banks and credit unions, the technology spend does not allow them to keep up. And so when you have a composable core solution that has the concept of tenancy, these smaller banks and credit unions have the capability to band together and kind of share technology costs, and it allows them to keep up. And, me personally, I find that the smaller institutions are really important, especially in the United States. They're kind of the backbone of banking. There's a lot of people that live in rural areas.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of community banks and credit unions that are not very big, but they still serve a very important role in their communities. And so when you look at it from that perspective, and many of those customers or members are going out and looking at, fintechs like Chime to do something that their institution doesn't offer them,
Mhm.
that's then, money that's not being kept within the community. And so that kind of need can be fulfilled by having a solution that allows you to have one stack built around a core that can then be shared across multiple institutions that still have their own data residency, still everything's still separate. They're really just sharing the build out.
So they don't necessarily have to get rid of their legacy. They just add this technology layer on top.
Yeah, so it's often called a speedboat or a dual core. Mambu charges on your usage. So if you were to, for example, say we want to build out a youth savings account to offer to our members, but we can't for the next 2 years because our legacy provider doesn't have time to put us on the roadmap. You could stand up Mambu's core in about 6 to 8 weeks. And then it's really just about the connections, the integrations between your existing stack to
Mhm.
put the core in touch with the digital layer, the teller system, whatever solutions you need. And then the Mambu core is only handling those new accounts.
So that makes it very attractive from that composable perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So in all of our podcasts, we throw in AI as a conversation, right? And so how is AI influencing core banking and the back-end strategies?
Answer is something I can't respond to because it's above my pay grade.
Okay.
But I can tell you that Mambu has significant AI strategy. We are already using AI where it is responsible to do so in terms of development and building out any kind of uh, enhancements that are either requested by clients or part of our roadmap. We're looking into things like intelligent payment rail selection where, depending on if you're paying cross border or domestically, which payment rail, maybe whether it's ACH or FedWire, for example, when should you use FedNow or real time payments? It allows for the selection to occur that can save both the financial institution and the end customer money by going through a rail that's either going to transact that payment faster or at a less expensive cost.
Okay.
Same thing with
So-
the core side.
Yeah.
Core banking really enables AI across the rest of your stack. So because every field in Mambu is an API, you can really extract the data from the core into your data hub, your analytics layer, your front office much more quickly, allowing you to do things like next best product in real time.
Okay. Very good. And so what common mistakes do institutions make during their attempt at modernization? And what advice might you have for them?
Sure. Oftentimes the mistakes that get made are based on risk assessment, and they consider going to a core that is next generation or modern core to be more risky because of the sense that either they see it as there's not as many in the US financial institutions using a given solution, or there's more risk because we have to manage additional vendors, but that really misses the mark from a standpoint of what the industry has been saying that they want
Hmm.
in terms of vendor lock-in, because vendor lock-in occurs because you sign up with a vendor that does everything, and maybe they don't do everything well, but they make it easier to sign with them.
Hmm.
And then they get in with that vendor and they're like, okay, but we don't like a specific solution. Well, now you have to pay that vendor to get your data. You have to wait for them to be able to allow you to integrate a new solution inside of it. And, you're back at the same place you were, 3, 5 years later.
So this is really a conversation that these executives have to have, especially the larger institutions, right, and the fintechs that have those legacy relationships. So, as a channel partner, relationships and partnerships are key to your success and to Mambo's success of reaching bigger audiences and being able to, innovate based on the needs of the industry. So, how do you go about nurturing those relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So from my perspective, there's so many different types of partnerships. And in some cases, we're partnering with companies that are much larger than us that offer, whether it be payment rails or global payment solutions. In other situations, we're partnering with smaller companies that have an individual solution that's modern and next generation, but they struggle to integrate with legacy architectures.
Mhm.
And oftentimes there's a scenario where Mambu is white labeled and the institution may not even know it's part of the solution because it's really just being used because its APIs allow for that, small little piece of a solution to interact with their legacy by orchestrating and really pushing and pulling the data that's needed for that solution to work, whether that be a fraud monitoring solution or whether it be a payments execution solution or simply a solution that allows them to do something like buy now, pay later.
Okay. So banking has always been a very highly regulated industry. So how do you create that challenge? Because also you'd have that flow down of your partners have to have those compliance requirements or they're bringing them to you. So that challenge of regulation and compliance, how did you kind of deal with that internally and then with your partner shop?
Sure. So as I said, the Mambu's core is thin in the sense
Hmm.
that it's your customer, your account, and your transaction processing. So ultimately, from a compliance perspective, that makes it fairly easy for us to stay regulatory compliant from our baseline. Any individual financial institution that's looking to modernize their core or is a greenfield startup that is just building from scratch will find it far easier to keep regulatory compliant with a composable architecture because you can have your regulatory reporting and your compliance solutions as well as your AML and all of those solutions outside of the core and easily configurable because it's all just basically about the API communications. And you don't have to actually, oftentimes our customers don't even tell us when they're adding solutions or upgrading or modernizing because it's all based on APIs and all of our APIs are open. So you
Hmm.
can just Google Mambu APIs and you'll find our documentation and it's freely available. We don't put any of that behind a pay gate. And so from a standpoint of being able to really pick the best in class solutions that keep you regulatory compliant, it's completely up to the financial institution and they can do it on their own timeline. And as I said, while we're always happy to help, no one actually has to contact us to be able to do that.
Was a very smart strategic decision on Mambu's part, right? Kind
Right.
of step away from that. So, how did you get here? Because obviously you're very passionate about this story. Composable word is, I hadn't heard it before, but now I hear it all the time. It's like one of those things, you all of a sudden you see a gray car and you never seen them before, and now that's all you see are gray cars. But so your journey to where you are today, tell us about that.
Sure. I spent 16 years, almost 16 years with JP Morgan Chase. So I right out of college spent the early part of my career as a banker. Specifically, I worked for I want to say about 9 years in the mortgage side of the house.
Mhm.
So got a lot of experience with capital markets, rates, um, all the various aspects of mortgages. In my 10th year, I switched into managing a team of business analysts and project managers at JP Morgan Chase, and really worked with upgrading not only the mortgage origination software, but also a lot of the connectivity with other parts of the bank. And obviously there's very complex and shared solutions across different parts of lending and deposit account ownership. And then I actually got recruited by another core banking provider, I want to say around late 2015, early 2016, and spent 9 years with them, and really began to understand kind of the first and second generation more legacy cores, the third generation more modular approach, where maybe they were originally legacy but kind of broke out and re-architected to make it more modular and allow for an easier time of customers to select and pick and choose which pieces they like and which pieces they don't. And kind of came to Mambu because throughout the past decade or so, one of the things I have seen is the struggle of any time there's a disruption within the market. And it can be regulatory, but it can also be on the payment side. It can also be going from, internet and mobile banking of the, 2010s to digital of the 2020s. Anytime that occurs, it becomes a really painful experience for financial institutions because they're not set up to be able to transition easily. There's a lot of vendor lock-in. A lot of times all of the integrations are point to point. So you have to break things apart. And composable banking to me is the only way to truly make yourself future-proof, because of the fact that it allows for you to, in real time, make use of the most modern solutions when you're ready, as opposed to when your vendor is ready.
And so that gives you some autonomy, but also allows you to innovate at the banking level, at the fintech level, things that you wouldn't have been able to do before, right?
That's correct.
So you made a comment about, the small banks and the small systems are a really good customer. So how do you break that mentality of, the old school versus the disruptive school, right? So how do you get that message across that your solution and then your partnerships that integrate in allow them to do the things that they have on their digitization path?
Yeah. So globally, we have partners that actually are made up of a collection of credit unions, community banks, what have you, where you might have 30 or 50 different financial institutions that are all members of a larger organization. And then that larger organization is actually our customer as well as our partner. So they'll take the Mambu core and build an entire stack around it that does everything that their member institutions needs to do. Payments, CRM, teller, card issuing and processing, everything that makes them a credit union or a bank. And then they implement each of their members as a tenant within that orchestrated build. And then within those tenants, they also often have multiple branches. So they can actually have all of their own data segregated out for the individual institutions, but they share the cost of, the licensing and any kind of IT support and all of those things that would normally be paid for by one specific financial institution are now shared by dozens. And so it allows for them to be treated, instead of as a 100 million asset under management or even 10 million asset under management financial institution, they're actually looked at as the whole. And so if you have 32 organizations that are combined 15 billion assets under management, it gives them more negotiating power, not only with us, obviously, but with all of the other solutions that are needed to really make up
Consolidation is kind of the key then, right, in the banking industry, as in many industries that we see.
Yeah,
Okay.
and oftentimes it's a path that allows them to, instead of merging, it
Hmm.
allows them to keep their autonomy and stay as their own institution, but still share the costs of that technology with other like-minded credit unions or community banks.
That's cool. So when we talked earlier, you had given me a story about how you solve problems personally as well, right? You I think it was your son needed something and you went ahead and you bought all the parts. Share
Yeah,
something like, share a little bit of that because that was a
sure.
great story and kind of aligns your thinking path, to your customers at Mambu.
Yeah, so the concept is building a PC, a computer. And when you're looking for a computer with which anyone with kids that are about my son's age, which is 16, would have known about, I don't know, 7 years ago or 8 years ago, the big game that all the kids were playing was Fortnite. And so my son didn't want to play Fortnite on his PlayStation because all of the streamers and the people that won the games were playing on PC. So he needed a PC. So he was, 8, 9 years old, sending me these links for, you know, $3,000, $4,000 Alienware gaming computers, and I was like, yeah, you're not getting that. And so I looked into it, and I found the specifications required for Fortnite, and I went online and ordered the parts and went to my local micro center and got them all, and it was great because it was an experience that allowed me to give him a Christmas present that was his big thing he wanted. I think I paid somewhere around $900 for everything, and then he spent Christmas Day putting together a computer with me. So he learned how to put it together. And believe it or not, it's much less complicated than you would think. Everything goes in one spot, right? Like the
Right.
video card only goes where the video card goes. And so you can't really mess it up. The point is, the value of doing that goes beyond the spending time with my son, and it goes beyond just saving money. It also allows now for me when he says, "Hey, this thing I'm doing for my school project requires me to create a video, and my video card's 7 years old. I don't
Mhm.
have to go buy him a new computer. I just have to go buy him a new video card, and then I unplug the old one and I plug in the new one, right? And then it runs some drivers, does some updates, whatever, and it's good to go. And the key point there is that the Mambu core and composable banking is really the same concept. Is
Mhm.
you know instead of taking this huge monolithic solution that does everything, some things well, some things not so well, but it does everything. You can take and build a stack that is best in class and fit for purpose for what you and your membership needs. And as those needs change, you have the ability to unplug the old solutions and plug in new ones. And that frankly includes your core, because Mambu doesn't own your data, the financial
Mhm.
institution does. So, it with our customers, theoretically, that has never happened. And I guess there would be contractual things in there, but theoretically somebody could unplug the Mambu core, do, you know, move the data of their customers and accounts over to a new core and plug it in. And the only way we would know about it is because the customer account in our core would go to zero.
Right. The usage
So,
goes down. Yeah.
yeah, so that's where the power of that capability, where your most important vendor really is your orchestration layer,
Mhm.
because that's where, as long as you keep that intact, any solution connected within that architecture can be unplugged and replaced, and you don't have to worry about touching anything else.
That's incredible. It's such a simple concept, but you know, you're obviously disrupting the ecosystem of legacy banking and able to connect smaller banks and other types of financial institutions to larger streams that they may not have been able to do before. So, it's kind of like the challenge isn't whether to innovate, but it's to do it responsibly.
Yeah.
And technology today allows us to do that. It's just finding as an organization that you're out there, right? That's
Yeah,
that's got
that's
to be
certainly
kind of
part
hard.
of it.
What kind of community things does Mambu do to try to get the word out and help organizations understand what their value is?
Yeah, I mean, we've been very active in the standard financial institution areas like GAC and Money 2020 and Finovate and all those different things.
Uh-huh.
We do a lot on LinkedIn. The head of North America, Amber Harson, has been in the credit union space for over 25 years. So she actually has a blog that you can find on LinkedIn and writes a lot about not only composable banking, but just modernization in general, AI, all of the things that banks and credit unions and fintechs are all thinking about right now in terms of, yeah, everybody wants to use it, but how do you do it the right way?
Mhm.
And where are the applications that actually have a value to them?
Okay. So as we close up the podcast, and thank you so much for being a part of this, what's sort of the parting words that Chad has for the audience and thinking of digital transformation?
Yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn or you can email me at chad.thomas@mambu.com. Always happy to have a discussion. As we discussed, I'm a partner manager. I'm not indirect sales, so I won't try and sell you anything, but I'm always happy to have a discussion about where you're at. I have a lot of friends that are, CEOs in the credit union space and community banks as well. So, this is something near and dear to my heart and happy to have the discussion. So I would just say if you're curious about what it might look like, give me a call and we can talk about it.
Thank you, Chad. And thank you for the education, because I never had any idea that this was part of the exposure of digital transformation. It's incredible. And now I have a new word in my dictionary of composable. So I'll use it whenever I can, and I'll give you credit.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you for
All
having
right.
me, Sally. This has been
Well,
great.
thank you very much. I appreciate that. And have a wonderful day.
You do the same.
Thanks.